Do not be afraid, our fate cannot be taken from us. It is a gift. Dante Alighieri, Inferno. Both good things and bad things can be called gifts. After all, gods have never needed to be reasonable. Scaramouche, Sumero Archon Quest 3.2. It all comes down to this. If you clicked on this video, it was meant to be. It was destiny. It was predetermined. This is the last part, for now, of this video series about fate, the Abyss Order, Clothar, Caribert, and a general world structure of Teyvat. To be completely fair with you, it will be much easier answering who isn't the sinner than to answer who is the sinner. There are a lot of theories floating around, and I will try to prove or disprove as much as possible, or at least bring context to the most relevant ones. If you haven't seen previous parts, please go and watch them first, especially part 2. The information in that video is essential to understanding the context in this video. And please don't forget that at the end of the day, this is just a theory/analysis. It's not meant to be extremely serious and 100% true. Everything that I will say in this video is not indicative of the final product. Really quick before we begin, I recently created a Ko-fi account, so if you like what I do and want to support me further, you will be able to do so by clicking the link in the description or in the head of the channel. You can also support me without spending a single dollar by subscribing to the channel, liking and sharing this video to your friends to spread it. Any help is appreciated. Thank you all. Mwah. With that out of the way, let's begin. To start, we will need some context of the timeline of Teyvat. So, let's go back to the very beginning. Back before the humans existed, before the gods, before everything. There was no silver moons and no golden sun. The world was engulfed in chaos, not ruled by rules of heaven. The land is filled with wishaps, dragon-like entities that freely roam the land with no humans in sight. They are ruled by the 7 dragon sovereigns, supreme beings representing their respective elements: fire, water, air, etc. And everything was like that for a very long time. But at some point, an egg appeared, and from this egg, the primordial one was birthed. Androgynous in nature, they had wings and a crown, but for the world to be created, the eggshell had to be broken. However, Phanes, the primordial one, used the eggshell to separate the universe and the microcosm of the world. And upon entering this world, they created their very first beings, the 4 shining shades. With the power over time and space, life and death, they fought in a great war with the 7 dragon sovereigns for 40 summers and 40 winters. At this point, the dragon sovereigns surrendered to the rule of heaven, but some of the dragons refused to surrender fully and fled to the darkest corners of the world. But they were not pursued. Instead, Primordial One and one of the shades began to reshape the world anew, separating the skies from the oceans and the land, creating life itself, plants, trees, animals, and finally, humans. The people of this world lived in harmony with their god for a very long time, quite literally a paradise. But everything has an end. The second invader, equal to the Primordial One in power, came to this new world, coveting the throne of heavens. The great battle began once again, and while the land was crumbling, people fled to the safest and darkest holes in the earth. But they were sealed off. Not knowing how the fight went, they just became trapped and continued to live their lives, and they called it Enkanomiya. That was a brief retelling of the book Before Sun and Moon, which most of you are already familiar with, or at least I hope so, but if you weren't, you're welcome. This book is the single greatest lore bomb and retelling of the prehistory of Teyvat. And now, let's get to the main topic of this video, the sinner. Okay, let's start by reviewing possible candidates in the role of the sinner in no particular order. We have King Deshret, also known as the Scarlet King. King Irmin, the last king of Conria, Rhine-daughter / Gold, the great sinner and the creator of Albedo. And last but certainly not the least, because he is the second Hurricane, also known as the second throne of Celestia. Okay, let's remove Gold out of the equation. We already heard her voice in the latest Windbloom Festival, and it's nothing like the Sinner's voice. The Sinner is identified as a male, while Rhine-daughter is identified as a woman, so I don't think we need any more confirmation than that. As for our other candidates, well, let's give them some background and draw connection to the Sinner, starting with King Deshret. Let's get it out of the way. Due to some revelations in the new Nahida's story quest, I'm now pretty sure that the Sinner is not King Deshret. Don't get me wrong, there is a giant amount of great theories by a lot of content creators that King Deshret is the Sinner, and sometimes they even combine King Deshret and King Irmin, but for the sake of the clarity of this video, we will look at them as separate entities, okay? Okay, to start, King Deshret actively plotted against the heavens, and also got the Goddess of Flowers to help him with his endeavor. The Goddess of Flowers, if you didn't know before, used to be in the Court of Heavens a very long time ago, but she was cast down due to a calamity when the three Moon Sisters turned on each other and the Silly race fell from grace. But let's not focus on her too much, shall we? It's not about her. King Deshret. Deshret told her all about his plans and asked for her help, and she did help him by telling him all that she knew about the heaven and the abyss, and ending with,
"Heed my warnings, seek not the Master of Four Shades, and inquire not of the mysteries of the sky and the abyss. Otherwise, as shown by the Nail of Retribution, certain calamity and sorrow shall follow."
However, King Deshret disagreed with the warnings of his partner and still came through with his plan, and obtained forbidden knowledge. So, 1 point for being a sinner in the eyes of the gods. We know that Deshret should have looked like our traveler, and we know that because of Lilipar. You see, when we met her, she stated that we resemble her master so much that upon seeing us, she thought that she encountered his shadow. However, we never seen Deshret directly, and Clothar did say that we are the abyss for the Conrians. Literally. On murals of Gurabad, he is depicted simply as an eye with a star surrounding it, as well as in the cutscenes about sealing him for good after the forbidden knowledge started to spread. Just look at this.
As long as forbidden knowledge continued to exist, it would forever blight this world. In the end, the proud king of the desert, my eternal lord, chose to sacrifice himself.
Do you see it? Yeah, we have two very distinct things that tie him to the Sinner. The literal purple crystal that he became after he was sealed, and a star that is all too similar to Conrian's star of the Eclipse dynasty. All is fine, but Jester, you might ask, with such strong claims, how can you disprove it? Well, first of all, don't hop in the fire before me, and second of all, it's very simple. But for now, if you are sensitive to spoilers, please scroll to the time on screen. You have been warned. Like, literally right now. Yeah, are we good? Okay, let's go. So, in a brand new Nahida story quest, after we heal Apep, the Dendro Dragon Sovereign, we ask how did she of all creatures became stained with the forbidden knowledge, since she's quite literally older than the gods themselves. And well, the short answer, the dragons tried to overpower the Primordial One with the power of the Abyss, but were unsuccessful. And after the Dragon King died, a lot of dragons lost their hope, but not her. She tried to obtain this knowledge herself, but she was stopped by a celestial nail, and so she rested until King Deshret came. He wanted to expand onto her domain, and a.p.a. granted him his wish, but under one condition. Basically, after his death, she will eat him alongside with his memories, knowledge, and elemental energy. So, because of that, we know that King Deshret is definitely not the sinner. You might make an argument that he may have been reborn by the Abyss, but I highly doubt that, since they would have needed at least something to work with, even if they can grant a life to a god in the first place. And as we know from Hu Tao and Raiden Shogun's story quest, when something dies, it comes back to the ley lines in the form of energy, back to Irminsul. But first of all, Teyvat made sure to not let him stain the Irminsul even further, and sealed him off before his death, and after that a.p.a. ate him. Since a.p.a. is older than the primordial one and all of the gods, I propose that she is much older than Irminsul itself. Remember, before the primordial one there was nothing but dragons, no fish, no animals, and no flora, including trees, including Irminsul. So, when a.p.a. ate him, all of the memories and elemental energy went directly to her, not into the ley lines. Deshret is dead for good. There's absolutely no way of him coming back. Right? Candidate number 2, King Irmin. If you don't read the lore in Genshin, which, let's be real, a lot of people don't do, then you probably haven't heard about this entity. So, let's start by stating the facts. He is the last king of Khaenri'ah under the Eclipse dynasty, the last dynasty of Khaenri'ah before the Cataclysm. The lore that could be found in the Hidden Strife event states that Irmin's strength failed at some point, which is assumed by many that he lost it. Besides this piece of information, we only have ties to the king, not necessarily directly stating his name, but the implied identity is quite clear. For example, the name Irmin is quite literally a part of the Irminsul, which is, as we know, hello, the most important tree in the world, holding all memories and energy. Yes, very important. And as most of you already probably know, if you follow the lore of Genshin at least, the silver twig of this tree left by Teyvat states that a sage hanged upside down on a tree to acquire knowledge of how to inscribe runes and control sacred words, and thus followed the kingdom established alongside the tree's roots, eventually gaining a glimpse of the secret of the cosmos. This story is clearly mirroring the story of the Odin from the Norse mythology, who did exactly that, hung upside down from a world tree to acquire knowledge of other worlds and conquer the power of the runes, which are basically sacred words. Also, as we all know, Odin had one eye because he traded his other eye in order to be able to see past, present, and future. Same could be said about King Irmin. We know him as a one-eyed king. And what did Dainsleif told us about the sinner after the quest? Well, I think that he might have seen you. And so, with the king of Khaenri'ah, to whom Dane should have been extremely close to as a royal guard, and basically knew him all the way, having one eye that could have seen past, present, and future, this is almost a confirmation to his identity. Also, think about the name, the Sinner. I think bringing forbidden knowledge to this world is quite clearly a sin in the eyes of the heavens. Okay, what about our last candidate, the second who came? Well, very little is known about this entity, going as far as we don't even know their gender. Speculating about this entity is extremely hard because everything that we know so far is they came after the war with the dragons and they are identical in strength to the primordial one. And that's it for the confirmed information. But let me propose something different. As we already know, the second and the primordial one were not on good terms, but we have absolutely no idea why. Presumably, they just came to this world and started fighting. throwing hands, destroying everything, pretty much the same as the war with the dragons. And so it is assumed that they wanted power, control over this land. But something I don't see anyone asking is, why? Why exactly this land, this planet? If they are identical in power to the primordial one, that means that they also should have power to create beings and empires under their control, or at least something akin to this. So why didn't they just pick a different planet and started terraforming it to create their own creatures? Well, that's where we start to speculate. I want to bring your attention to some very interesting and rarely talked about things that are stated in Before Sun and Moon. The primordial one had a sacred plan for humans, but never told them what it is. Also, the one taboo was to succumb to temptation, but the path to temptation had already been sealed. Please remember this, as it will be very important later. The first thing that I have to propose is that Primordial One and the second who came are two sides of the same coin, an opposition, yin and yang. This idea is quite popular in a lot of mythologies around the world, much more in Eastern mythology, which is very fitting seeing as Genshin is a Chinese game. If we assume that Phanes is in fact the Primordial One and was birthed from an egg, as stated in Before Sun and Moon, then we can clearly tie them to the Phanes from Orphic Greek mythology. As we know, they hatched from a cosmic egg with a serpent wound around it, but there are no mentions of the serpents in Genshin theology. Or is there? Remember the Gnostic hymn? Yeah, the Battle Pass cutscene. It's talking about the kingdom in the heavens, the crowned heir with the task of seeking out the Genesis Pearl, and the Kingdom of Darkness. But this heir was deceived, and the memories of her noble origins faded, to the point that she now believed that she was the queen of the Kingdom of Darkness. Also, it's talking about a second crowned heir with the same path. The narrator, or Wenti, outright states that this is the story of your journey, your tale to be told. So, let's draw connections and parallels to the existing characters. I will try to go by the most straightforward answers that were given in the Gnostic hymn, as to not stretch this video for even longer with assumptions. Okay? Let's go. The kingdom in the skies is most probably Celestia, but who is the king on the throne? As we know from Before Sun and Moon, the primordial one was called the Sovereign of Sovereigns and the King of Kings. I believe that this is exactly who we see in the cutscene, and the heirs to the throne is actually us and our sibling. If we follow the game's canon, then the Abyss Twin is actually Lumine, and as we can see, the first heir resembles her quite perfectly. Now, the next thing that we see is a pearl and a black serpent with purple and red eyes, dripping poison and staining the pearl. As we know, serpents have a very bad reputation in mythology, being the devil and corrupting the earliest humans, driving them to sin. But what about the pearl? Well, usually it is a symbol of God's love, purity and knowledge. Huh, so divine knowledge then. The Kingdom of Darkness is probably the Dark Sea, all that is outside of Teyvat, without protection of gods, and with dark creatures roaming everywhere. Yeah, that sounds a lot like a Kingdom of Darkness to me. I don't know about you, but to me, yeah. So if we summarize, the Primordial One wanted us to travel outside of Teyvat to the lands beyond the firmament to retrieve the Pearl, which is the divine knowledge, and become new heirs to his throne. However, as we saw, our sibling and the Pearl both got corrupted in the process, and it is now our task to retrieve both our sibling and the Pearl. Oh, and also, remember how there was this interesting line that there was something about one taboo being temptation, and that the path to it is already blocked? Well, that is probably referring to the firmament over Teyvat blocking the path to the Dark Sea and the forbidden knowledge. But why would the Primordial One want us to go and find this pearl? Was it important to him personally? The easiest answer would be that they wanted us to cleanse this pearl of this dark corruption, as it is known that we already have this power. Even when it is completely sealed, we still cleanse Dwalin from his corruption. And, well, there is a hymn of the pearl in Gnosticism, basically a one-to-one retelling of the story, with the King of Kings and his heir going to Egypt to retrieve the pearl from the Black Serpent, but forgetting everything in the process. It is a little different, being that there was only one heir and they were in fact male. The pearl there may represent the sparkle of light imprisoned in this world, or the soul lying in the darkness of the human body, as well as the individual's capacity for growth even in an alien environment. Basically, what I'm seeing here is that the Primordial One wanted to test his heirs to see if they're able to find their own change, growth, become something more than they are right now, and being able to resist temptation of the Serpent and his forbidden knowledge. And we do know that our traveler is immensely resistant to this forbidden knowledge, as Nahida's outright stated in her latest quest. Also, an interesting moment that I found is that we see the Gnostic Chorus every 40 days. It always rubbed me the wrong way that Battle Pass is always exactly 40 days long, since, well, nothing in Genshin correlates with it. Not the banners, not the length of one version, not the Abyss cycle, nothing. Well, it just so happens that 40 is a very special number in religion. In Judaism and Christianity, which, mind you, are the two parent religions of Gnosticism, the number 40 means a very long and very important time period. Examples are plenty. Rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights during the flood. Moses stays on Mount Sinai for 40 days and nights in order to receive the 10 Commandments. The Hebrew people lived in the lands outside of the Promised Land for 40 years. But what caught my eye the most is, before his temptation, Jesus fasted 40 days and 40 nights in the Judean desert. As it is told, the three temptations of Jesus were: create the bread out of the stones, a promise of every kingdom in the world if he chose to worship Satan, and to jump from a high place and hope that the angels pick him up in order to test the love of God. Or, if we look at it the other way, physical, material, and emotional temptation. Eating food, having riches, and being emotionally stable, believing in God and his love. You know what? It sounds extremely familiar to a certain line in the book Before Sun and Moon. If there was hunger, the heavens would bring down food and rain. If there was poverty, the earth would bring forth its riches. If melancholy were to spread, the heavens would reply with their voices. So confirming that the gods are really there, and they actually love people. The one taboo was to succumb to temptation, as in 3 temptations of Jesus. You know what I just realized? We didn't actually define the word sinner. By definition, a sinner is someone who transgresses against divine law by committing an immoral act. So, now we know that the sinner crystal succumbed to temptation and thus was pronounced a sinner. But even without knowing what exactly this temptation is, how was he able to succumb to it in the first place, if the path to it was sealed since even before the second who came, well, came? In the new quest, Quarina of Good and Evil, we got a very interesting lore bit. An NPC named Nasejuna literally told us that long ago, Conriad once built a facility in the desert near Tunigi Hollow that connected them to the realms beyond. And in a book called Legend of the Shattered Halberd, we can find a particular line that says, "The first divine Halberd, Irmin, once pierced the axis mundi, center of the world, and connected the 9 realms." I mean, yeah, we have only 3 realms in Genshin, but it's not as important. What's important is that this book is literally calling King Irmin by the name and accurately describes as his sin, breaking through the primordial one's barrier and connecting the realms, thus letting the abyss into this world in the form of forbidden knowledge. But if you think that the sinner is the biggest threat that we have in this game, then oh boy, you are so wrong. Let's go for a brief detour, shall we? Let's get back to the Gnostic hymn, to a specific entity, the Black Serpent. I find it hard to believe that a crystal entity that is the sinner is the same that this serpent, simply because, well, how can they correlate crystals and snakes? And so, I propose another entity, Ananke. Ananke is mother of Fanes in the Orphic mythos, the embodiment of fate, necessity and inevitability. She had a serpent form and a brother, Kronos, time itself, and while they were in the process of making this egg, they tied around the universe. And you know, there is a very prominent serpent in mythology, especially in Gnosticism and alchemy, that is tied around the world. It's Ouroboros. The Ouroboros in alchemy is usually depicted as black and white, representing a Gnostic duality of existence, analogous to the Taoist yin and yang. Also, Ouroboros is linked to another very important serpent of the world, the Jormungander. In Norse mythology, a giant serpent that resided at the roots of the world tree, never to be moved from there, or the world will collapse. Which is very fitting, seeing as Khaenri'ah and King Irmin are based on Norse mythology. And while we are not that far from the topic of alchemy, one of the oldest images of the Ouroboros is actually the Chrysopia Ouroboros of Cleopatra the Alchemist. Chrysopia, or chrysopoia, is a process of creating gold in alchemy. This exact depiction is linked with the legendary magnum opus of the alchemists, the Philosopher's Stone. And what do we know about the stone? Well, besides turning basically anything into gold and being linked with alchemists, it was capable of granting immortality. Okay, let me get to the point, but please note that this is complete crack at this point and I am not responsible for any of this. The voices made me do it. So, I propose that Gold, the great sinner and alchemist of Khaenri'ah, was looking to create the Philosopher's Stone for some reason. Maybe it was an order from King Irmin in order to, well, maybe overthrow the gods, seen as they were a godless nation. The reason why is not as important right now. And so, Rheindotter tried to create the Philosopher's Stone. And if we follow the 4 stages of the creation of the stone, it's first Nigredo, Durin, then Albedo, both of whom are as old as the Cataclysm itself, then Citrinitas and Rubedo, or black, white, yellow and red. But in creation of the stone, she required a power that is not from this world, and in her search, she found this power in a serpent Ouroboros that resided at the base of the Irminsul, but she was deceived and her creation corrupted. This Philosopher's Stone, or should I say, the Sinner's Stone, full of the abyssal energy, is able to give immortality, but in a very cruel way, not intended before. However, King Irmin wanted nothing more than this, and became one with this crystal, enslaving his own mind in this perfect and timeless creation. This idea can be further proved with the Dark Serpent statuettes that all formal royal guards of Khaenri'ah carry with them. The depictions of the King Irmin, but at the very last one, the statuette appears to have gained an eye in form of a red gem, exactly as it is described in alchemy, a red Philosopher's Stone. But after that, he got corrupted and started emanating an ominous glow, the same red and purple glow that could be found in the Serpent's eyes in the Gnostic hymn. Maybe, to this day, gold still tries to find the truth of this world and to create true, uncorrupted Philosopher's Stone. Or perhaps a way to cleanse the existing one. Heck, who knows, maybe the pearl from the Gnostic Chorus is the Philosopher's Stone. I mean, at this point anything is basically possible. So, the Serpent in this case may or may not be either Ananke, the Ouroboros, or the Jormungander. It is extremely hard to tell yet, because the only thing that we know is the color of its eyes, and that it supposedly can erase memories, but on a bigger scale than the Irminsul, affecting even the travelers like us and our sibling. We will be getting our answers next time when Dainsleif decides to show his face to us once again. At least we will know the identity of the sinner. As to everything else, well, my little cinnamons, we will have to wait. Thank you all so much for watching this video and staying to the end. I appreciate every single one of you. If you would like to support me in any way, then you can like, subscribe and share this video to your friends. And if you would like to go one step further, then you can also buy me a coffee. As you may know, it is not easy being in Ukraine right now, so if you want to support my work, you can find the link in the description, as well as in the head of the channel. Thank you all once again, stay safe, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.